Miley Cyrus is teasing a new era. Ariana Grande has revealed the track list for her deluxe edition of Eternal Sunshine. Plus, there's a major change in how the Billboard charts are going to be counted moving forward. All that and more on the Pop Pod. It is Tuesday, March the 18th. I'm Pop Sam Cam. Let's get started. Before we launch into the headlines, I wanted to say a massive thank you to everybody who's listened to the podcast first week. We charted in many charts in the US, the UK, and Australia, and I would love to just keep this momentum going. If you've got some time and you like the podcast, please leave a review or leave a star review at least. I would really appreciate that. And hit subscribe if you're not already. Would you be the one on mine? First up this week, Ariana Grande has revealed the track listing of the Eternal Sunshine Deluxe Brighter Days Ahead. There is going to be 6 new tracks, and one of them includes an extended edition of Intro End of the World, which was obviously on the standard edition and became a hugely popular track on TikTok. But I was waiting to see whether she would extend it, and she is going to on the deluxe, which I am very excited to hear. There's also a track on the album called Hampstead, which is where she lived while she was filming Wicked in the UK, and she's calling it one of her favorite songs that she's ever written. It's not just Ariana Grande who's gearing up to release something new. We've also got Miley Cyrus, who has started teasing her new album Something Beautiful with a website reboot. She teased this project briefly at the end of last year and described it a concept album, and basically said that it was like music for a sick world, which is quite dark. I'm very interested to see how this goes. I was wanting something more experimental from her because I felt like Endless Summer Vacation played it a little bit safe, but this one doesn't seem like it's going to be like that. We'll see when it comes, but I think that it should be in the next couple months. Next up, Carly Uchis. We talked about her on the podcast yesterday. She was teasing a new album, and just like that, she's already announced it. It's called Sincerely. We don't know when it's coming yet, but she's dropped a little teaser.
I dream of a home that even time will lie down and be still for. A place where everything works out the way it should.
Even more new pop music coming, with The Weeknd announcing that he has more new music on the way. He only just dropped Hurry Up Tomorrow at the beginning of this year. There was 22 new songs on this album. But in a tweet where he talked about the new film for the album coming, he said that we should also anticipate more new music soon. In the final piece of news for today, Billboard has announced several new rules that they are going to be introducing for the chart. And there's one that I've been talking about for a while, which is digital variants. Last year, there was a lot of artists that were releasing digital variants of the album and included 1 or 2 extra tracks on each version. So fans could essentially end up with like up to 10 versions of the album just to get the different bonus tracks that were on each variant. Billboard has now announced that artists can only release a max of 4 variants that will be counted to the chart. After that, they are completely null and void, which I think is an incredible development. Let's get into the charts, where SOS by SZA has officially become the longest running top 10 album by a black artist, surpassing Michael Jackson's Thriller. It is now on its way to be the longest running top 10 album by a female artist in Billboard 200 history, which is just an incredible feat for an artist who is still only on her 2nd album. The Billboard 200 has been released for the week, and Gaga has debuted atop with Mayhem, 219,000 sold, which is enough to give her the 3rd biggest debut of 2025, behind The Weeknd and also Drake and Party Next Door's album, which I think is an incredible result for her. Jenny also debuted with her debut album Ruby at number 7 with 57,000 copies sold. Now, if we put that into the context with the other Blackpink girls, Rosé went to number 3 with hers selling over 100,000, while Lisa debuted at number 7 with 45,000. So she has a similar chart, well, the exact same chart debut as Jenny, but Jenny does about 10k better than Lisa. Not much movement on the Billboard Hot 100, where Luther by Kendrick Lamar and SZA spends a 4th week at number 1, which is incredible. Kendrick is on one of the runs of his life, while SZA, as we mentioned, top of this segment, is also on one of the runs of her life. So This is a very good time for both of them. I will hit you tomorrow and the day after with more updates about what we can expect from next week's charts, where we're expecting big debuts from people like Chappell Roan and also Playboi Carti with his new album, Music.
Big, hard.
For the main part of the podcast today, I want to talk about Selena Gomez. I want to talk specifically about when did Selena Gomez lose her footing as one of the biggest names in pop music? Selena Gomez in 2019, just before the pandemic, released Lose You to Love Me as the lead single off Rare, and the song debuted at the top of the Hot 100.
We'd always go into it blindly. I needed to lose you to find me.
At this point, I just felt like Selena was everywhere. I think she was the most followed person on Instagram. She maybe still is the most followed person on Instagram. I'm not sure, but I just know that the music was hitting. There was so much excitement for that era. She had teamed up with Julia Michaels and Justin Tranter for just this big ballad that addressed obviously a huge relationship between her and Justin Bieber that had a lot of public interest. But I think there was interest for her music because of what she had set up with her previous album, Revival. Revival had had so many hits: Good For You, Hands to Myself, Same Old Love, all top 10 records. And then when Lose You to Love Me came out and debuted straight at number 1, I thought, here is somebody who is at the peak of her powers right now and potentially in that moment at the top of the pop pyramid. I expected that to keep going, but then the pandemic hit. And I think the pandemic hitting in the middle of the Rare rollout. Rare came out in January. Obviously, we were all locked down by like late March. That completely destroyed that era for her. But it also was already starting to lose steam. Rare, the next single after Lose You to Love Me, debuted at number 30 and didn't manage to do anything more than that. And then I think because of the pandemic, things just fell apart and she stopped pushing that album completely. And I feel like that is the end of the Selena Gomez imperial moment in pop music, which was very short-lived and much shorter-lived than I expected. And I put this out on my Instagram to my followers there, and I asked them, why do they think that this has happened? The one thing that kept coming up again and again was that they feel like her focus has moved from music to acting and also her company Rare Beauty, which does incredibly well. And I think that that is definitely the main reason. In 2021, she debuted as part of Only Murders in the Building.
The elevator with these two weirdos. Then Tim got in the elevator.
Approximately 12 minutes from now, I will be murdered.
And that TV show has done incredibly well, now on its 4th season, consistently nominated in the award shows, in the Emmys, in the Golden Globes, and I think has given Selena some real credentials in the acting world, more so than she ever got in the music world. And I think because of that, naturally, she's transitioned more and more into acting. She had a very memorable role in Emilia Perez last year. That obviously was one of the big movies around Oscar season. And I think because of that kind of critical appraisal she's getting, she's kind of moving away from music because she never really got that there. She got the commercial appraisal, but the critical appraisal has always kind of been lacking. But then I actually looked at the charts and what she's been doing since Rare came out in 2020, and she really hasn't taken her foot off the gas in terms of music. She's actually had quite a few releases. She had her Spanish EP, Revelación, I think in 2021. And that was when she sung entirely in Spanish and gave obviously a different vibe. That underperformed on the charts, but I think that was kind of expected, and that was more of an artistic move from her than anything else. And then she's kept dropping a couple of singles here and there. 2023's Single Soon was the best performing. That got to number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100.
I'm picking out this dress, trying on these shoes, 'cause I'll be single soon, I'll be single soon.
But she essentially hasn't, apart from that, reached the top 50 of the charts since then, solo-wise. Obviously, huge hit with Rima on Calm Down in 2023. that continued well into last year. But in terms of her own solo material that she's been dropping, the response has been tepid, to say the least. I think it kind of reached fever point when she dropped Love On last year, and the response to it was not great. The chart response was not great. And because of that, I think she'd been talking about this album, the follow-up to Rare. It was meant to be really danceable, upbeat. And after that, she was just like, nah, fuck it, not doing that. But then she surprised us a couple of weeks ago by announcing that she is releasing an album with her fiance, Benny Blanco, called I Said I Loved You First.
Call me when you break up. I wanna be the first one on your mind when you wake up.
I've been trying to figure out what she expects from this album. The highest charting single so far is at number 58 on the Billboard Hot 100 with Call Me When You Break Up with Gracie Abrams. And the other singles just have not been able to hit yet. But in terms of the music videos and the style of this album and what she's been giving so far, I get the feeling that she doesn't really care. This seems to be a real pleasure project for her. One, because she's working with her fiance, and two, because she's taken her eye off music onto acting. And it means that she's a little bit more relaxed with this rollout. She doesn't feel like this is kind of her bread and butter and this is what is going to keep her public image up. And I think that that can often be quite a great thing for an artist because it means we get some of the freest music of their career. I must admit, I feel like we're not really hearing that yet with the singles, apart from Sunset Boulevard, which I saw some of that cheekiness come out that she gave us on like Bad Liar and Fetish years and years ago, which I think was the era when she was really in her prime and doing the most interesting stuff musically.
Oh, I'm trying. Oh, trying not to think about you.
And I would just love her to explore that more on this album. And if we just take our eyes off the charts with this record and just let her do her thing, I think that that's when she's really going to shine. I felt like it didn't really matter, for example, back in the day where Bad Liar charted, because it was such a strong artistic statement from her. And I actually think it set her up and gave her that kind of like confidence, but also that reputation of making great music and being right in her lane to get that number one in 2019 with Lose You to Love Me. I'm not sure what to expect from this album. The singles have all been incredibly different, but I would love to hear more of that kind of like cheekiness and experimentalism that she gives us in that like bridge towards the chorus on Sunset Boulevard. But in terms of her time at the top of the pop pyramid, for now, I feel like it's over, and it's almost over by her own decision to move further into acting and to follow that more. And why wouldn't she, given the success that she's having in that arena? But I must admit, she did fulfill this part of pop music that I feel like is kind of unfulfilled. She knows she doesn't have the best voice of all the pop stars, but she knew for a long period of time exactly how to use it. And she knew that her charisma was the thing that could carry her across the line. And it reminds me a lot of Sabrina Carpenter's music at the moment, where even when she's not kind of belting, she's delivering these really smart lyrics and she's pronouncing it and enunciating it in such a way that makes it super, super interesting. And I feel like that was Selena's biggest strength with songs like Bad Liar and Good For You as well. I would love to see that back. What do you think? Do you think that she has what it takes to find herself in the top 10 again for music, or do you think acting is the way forward for Selena? Let me know. Drop comments on the TikTok video when I release it, or you can also comment on this podcast if it allows you to. You can email me, you can DM me, you can send me a voice note wherever you can find me. And I mentioned sending a voice note because I'm about to play a voice note from a listener who sent one in with a hot take.
Hey Pop Sam Cam, it's Stefan here, and I've been following you on Instagram and TikTok for quite a while now, and I really like the podcast. I've always liked your takes on pop music, and I wonder what you're going to think of my hot take. So my hot take is that I think that Hilary Duff walked so that Disney stars like Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato could run. I think she laid a lot of the groundwork for these kind of Disney-ish stars to have these surprisingly long careers. And if she had hit a little later into like the streaming era, I think her career would have lasted a lot longer. I've always really liked her songs, even though she is not a good singer. So that's my take. Love the podcast. Bye.
That is a very interesting one. I love how you kind of beef up Hilary Duff and give her all this credit, and then at the end just mention, but she's got a shit voice. But I think it's completely true that Hilary Duff was the kind of OG, I don't want to say OG child star because obviously there was so many before, but she kind of showed exactly how you could transition from that Disney star into a more like fully realized pop star. And it's something that we've seen so much. I mean, we literally just talked about Selena Gomez, who was a child star. We've talked about Miley Cyrus and Ariana Grande at the top of the podcast, both child stars. And all of these artists have successfully transitioned from child stars into being something much more legitimate and being known for their pop career more than for their child star career. But I feel like that's not the case with Hilary Duff. Obviously, she's moved on to like be in some pretty long running and successful shows like Younger. But mostly a lot of people or a lot of millennials remember her as Lizzie McGuire, even though she did have a couple of pop hits. But I think her issue was always with legitimacy. There was always this awkward period with child stars where they had to grow up and where they had to become more mature. And it was often a very misogynistic transition that they had to do. And they had to put themselves out in the public view in some kind of like sexy and mature way. And I know that she tried to do that with the album, I think it was called Dignity, that had Play with Fire and stuff. But the public just wasn't ready to receive that kind of legitimate music from Hilary Duff, given that her music kind of always had this sort of sense of youthfulness and almost immaturity to it as well. And there was nothing wrong with that because she was literally immature. She was a child making this music. But for some reason, back then, there was always this really difficult bridge that you had to cross. And I don't think she ever quite crossed it in the same way that Selena, Ariana, and Miley successfully navigated. And I think after Hilary, we just saw so many able to do it. But you've also got to consider that before Hilary, you did have Britney and Justin on the Mickey Mouse Club as well, and they were able to do it. But I do agree that Hilary Duff and the path that she went on feels more in line with kind of our modern stars like Ariana and Miley. And I do think she kind of paved the way for them to be able to do it eventually. I do think that she has some hits, but I don't think she ever really had that like world-stopping hit. Obviously, she had songs like So Yesterday that did exceptionally well, but she never really quite had that Hit Me Baby One More Time, or I mean, can't even start with Ariana Grande because she's had so many, but like Miley Cyrus, See You Again, she never really found that. And I think because of that, it was always going to be difficult to make a pop career legitimate. But I like this question, and I would love you guys to keep sending in voice notes. You can email me. I'll drop the email down below where you can send these voice notes. That is it for the Pop Pod today. Thank you for joining me. We're going to come back tomorrow with an interview with Rose Gray, British artist who's made one of my favorite albums of 2025 so far. You can always message me about what you would like to see on the podcast. I would love to hear from you. See you tomorrow.